I am proud and happy to be here. I'm here because my good friend Alice Lanahan, because what you people are attempting to do in the grassroots, even though today is the Notre Dame. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so believe me, when we get done with this, it's off to the game. I was greeted by, Alice sent me the other day, some of these anonymous blogs you people have suddenly been into Texas attacking me, which is fine. I'm used to being attacked, even though people can't get their facts straight. I really objected to the fact that they attacked Alice, and what you could tell by when I read this blog the other yesterday before yesterday was, you know, what it really is about is the same problem we have nationally, which is politicians and people in power would like you to do a lot of things for them except interfere.
Amen.
They would like you to suck the envelopes, give them money, knock on doors, vote like they tell you to do, and then go away. And what they produce in our politics is unfortunately what I think is now a crisis in our political life. Abraham Lincoln, I saw the movie Lincoln, which is really quite something, and remind you of everything that Washington is not in terms of courage and larger issues and guts and politics. And it certainly wasn't Al Gore, who I thought was, I saw just the same day he was selling his company to an oil country, the man who is the environmentalist, to an Al-Qaeda basically supporting media group Al Jazeera.
Exactly.
But in any event, I thought that this made me think about Lincoln, who is one of my favorites, even though I'm a Southerner. The fight to preserve the Union in the country and to change a situation was very important. And Lincoln described it as, he said to John Hay, his then young secretary in the White House, at that time the president had, I think, 2 or 3 staffers, as opposed to thousands. He was running a civil war. And he said, you know, this is a people's contest. He said it doesn't matter. His theory was it didn't matter what he did, it mattered what the people did. And he said what's essentially at stake in this struggle is to disprove the notion that popular government is an absurdity. And it seems to me that we have that. Now, one of the things this blogger did was attack the idea that I talk a lot about, or have in my life, about the alienation of the American people. I happen to believe that we have a political class that is impervious by its power and privilege to what the American people want across the board. That we are united by more things than we are divided by. Because our politics is conducted in a different way, but to give you an idea, one of the things, and if you disagree with these notions, you can say so, but, you know, I've done some surveys on this. I used to be in the polling business. But one of the questions I asked in the last year was a question that said the Declaration of Independence says that our government is founded on the Declaration of Independence founded on the notion that all the legitimate government derives its power from the consent of the governed. Do you think the government in Washington governs with the consent of the American people? Somewhere between 75 and 79% of Americans across the board, people you would think from liberal to conservative, disagree. I describe that as a pre-revolutionary moment. That is, in fact, what we fought revolution about. When 83% of the American people believe that the system is rigged by whether it's the banks, the unions, the lobbyists, the interest groups, against the very good of the country and to the detriment of every man, woman, and child in America, that's a staggering percentage, and yet that is what Americans believe. And to the nature of the political class, which I'm going to address for a couple of minutes here, out of what we just saw in Washington. But when asked whether or not the political class is more interested in preserving its power and privilege, even at the detriment of the future survival of the United States, when 2/3 of the American people believe that about the people who run their country, then you have a problem. Today, Gallup reported, just in line with that idea, that 77% of the American people now said today, or in a poll this week, they announced it today, that what's going on in the politics in Washington has become a serious threat to the survival of the country. And yet, they are not heard. I watched I must tell you, I want to use this as an example because I think it's important. Because it is the importance of what the grassroots must do. I'm in politics because I have 3 grandchildren who are now 7, 6, and 5. Well, the 4-year-old will be 5 next month. And that's why I got back into politics to some extent. But you know, we have this fiscal cliff issue. Now, I read yesterday, Mark Zuckerman is quite an intelligent man, wrote a piece talking about that the unfunded liability of the federal government, not the $16 trillion we talk about, well on its way into the 25 billion trillion, excuse me, before Obama is finished. But the unfunded liability, that which if you were running a business by law you would have to account for, they would put you in jail. Our government doesn't account for the way the law works. They have their own. $87 trillion. It's 550% of the gross national product. This is a threat to every child, every one of our, not our futures, but our children and grandchildren and their children to come. We know that. And we just watched a spectacle in which, and this is, I'm going to be very hard on everyone, but you know, for people who are supposed to be conservatives, I watched this bill that came out. The Wall Street Journal described as massive cronyism. Not only was there $41 in taxes for every dollar of spending cut, there was $1/3 trillion of actual new spending. And there was trillions, and will be trillions of dollars, in tax breaks for all kinds of special interests. And, you know, the president gets up, and he's as disingenuous as any president I've seen since Richard Nixon. Getting up talking about how we made the millionaires and the billionaires pay, except for the carried interest rate provision, which is where Warren Buffett gets to pay his taxes at 15% as opposed on income, as opposed to what you pay. And that's called a hedge fund. It's an exemption for the hedge fund carried interest. You know how it came about? In 2007, when it was voted in the House to close it, it went to the Senate, and Chuck Schumer and Max Baucus, who was then Senate Finance Chairman, and Chuck Schumer, who was running the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, went to the hedge fund industry and told them if they gave them X amount of money, they would kill the repeal of that deduction. Guess who sat in the U.S. Senate and said not a word? Barack Obama. Guess what wasn't done? But one thing the White House insisted on was that the entire package of these giveaways on what I call a second stimulus, but all of these energy stimulus thing, the corruption of this thing, it was a raping of the American people on a scale that was mind-boggling. And who delivered that? The Republican Party.
Yeah.
You know, when Bill just talked about people who say they're conservatives or not, you know, and I keep watching this, it's like I like to say there's 2 parties in America. We have the corrupt party and the stupid party. My party is somewhat more corrupt, yours is corrupt too, and we're stupid, but never as stupid as you guys. You know, I look at Senator McConnell. It came to me, I said this on the air on Fox yesterday. This is the 3rd straight year, at the last minute, he has done a deal to the absolute detriment of not only the policies of the country, the philosophy he claims to represent, but the interests of his own party. And I decided that I think he may be an alien clone who is occupying that seat and whose controller is Joe Biden. Because every time in 2010, when the Tea Parties and the country rose up against the health care bill, and what I said in an interview that Rush Limbaugh has just published in his newsletter, a long interview, I said, in 2010, the Republican establishment did not engineer victory of 2010, it was imposed upon them.
That's right.
It was imposed upon them by people like you and people in the country, and they have resented it ever since. And the moral words of Trent Lott, our deal is, well, you know what, we just have to co-opt these people. When you have one political party with 2 wings, and one thing that struck me in this fiscal deal, not only the massive amounts of money, the lack and the total surrender on an issue, and just so that it's not, I'm not doing this in just retrospect, I wrote a piece in Breitbart, which I write for, in which I pointed out the strategy and set it on the box and made it clear in Political Insiders, which is on Sunday afternoons that I'm on Doug Show and John Levine. And I said, you know, this is very simple. The president has really, was first demand in December that he be allowed to unilaterally raise the debt ceiling. So I said, but the Republicans needs a victory. First of all, you're going to get higher taxes. Well, what I don't understand about this bill, if you were going to give him a higher tax rate, why did you have to give him all the rest of it?
Amen.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have gotten that off the table to begin with. He did win the election on that point. In 2010, after the massive victory, repudiation of the president, it was McConnell, Boehner, and the Republicans who brought him back to life. But at the end of the session, the post-election deal, and they gave him another stimulus, which is what helped him in the election. And they put all on the issue of taxes. My position was, and I said at the time, it was very simple. You simply said, when we had an election, Mr. President, remember the words, elections have consequences. You want to raise taxes, you raise them. We're not doing a damn thing.
Exactly.
He would have caved. He caved anyway. He would have had to cave. But they had to give him everything from defense of merit, from don't ask, don't tell, a second stimulus, everything. And for some reason, it dawned on me in this, watching this debacle, which is just really outrageous when you think about where the condition of the country is. That, you know, all these people in Washington want to spend money. It doesn't matter which party they are. Some of them just say they don't want to spend money. And the other thing is they're all there, many of them are there to serve special interests. They're really good people there fighting, but their numbers are very few. And when you look at the people who voted for this monstrosity. Now, my simple question was this: why didn't the House strip the bill?
Right.
I mean, really, just strip it out and say, you want higher taxes, we're taking everything else out. And then, you know, and first of all, if they'd taken that off the table, my piece had argued that what the Republicans and what needed to be done, the president, just as Roosevelt had done, Franklin Roosevelt had done with the court packet in '37, was overreaching. Now, the difference was Franklin Roosevelt won the greatest landslide at that point in American history, and was, in my family at least, a god in the middle of the line. Barack Obama won not a landslide, he is not God. And it was, but he said, I should have arrogate to myself the single power. So I said, why don't you put that in the bill, put it up, and force the issue in this country to a debate about the debt.
Amen.
And about the debt ceiling, because I know the country doesn't believe that the president should have unilateral power to just spend, to raise, put the country over the abyss, much less, not the cliff, but the abyss of where we're going with our debts. So, McConnell, who is just my hero, this man has presided over 2 elections in the Senate that the Republicans should have won. The last one, there were 33 seats up, 23 of them were Democrats, 12 of them in trouble, and he lost 2 seats. And he was elected unanimously as leader again.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole Peter, this losing thing, is lack of responsibility. But anyway, so he introduces this bill. Someone must have told me I did. Says he's going to do this. Harry Reid has a meeting in the Democratic caucus and calls his bluff. The theory in my article was simple. Make everybody take a stand and a vote. Let it come up in the Senate, debate it, make that the issue to get the taxes off the table, get that issue on the table, which is what really matters, and make every Democrat, including Mary Landrieu, Mark Pryor, and a whole bunch of people, take a position on this in 2014. And if the Democrats wanted to pass it, fine, it would go to the House and be killed, and they would all be on record. But the country would get a debate, and the Republicans might actually, instead of retreating like the French army in 1940, with their tail between their legs, they might have actually been able to start turning the argument. Now they claim they're going to do it on the debt. See, they're not. They're going to just, once again, because they've not prepared the country with a narrative. It goes back to how the election got lost. And let me tell you something, but it struck me watching that bill and watching the special breaks to, it was just horrendous. You should read the Wall Street Journal report on it. I mean, to Hollywood, and everybody but the American people. And, it was, you know, and it reminded, to paraphrase the comment that James Carville hung up in the Clinton war room in 1992 that's famous, let me just say, it's the corruption, stupid. It is the corruption in national politics, and it is the corruption in local politics. One is a feeder system for the other. That's what you're fighting, and that's what's really important. And what we have is, I mean, we have an election. We need to say a few words about it. I had said it I know because I actually played this at the David Horowitz conference in November, from what I had said in 2011. And I actually played the clips. What I had said then, I said, you know, the way you people are going, this is November 2011, we're going to be here a year from now celebrating Barack Obama's re-election. There is no narrative. You do not understand the argument how to make a case on a constant, factual, clear basis to the 10 million people. Look, the election in 2012 would be about moving the 5 million people who voted for Barack Obama, who were Democrats and independents and were happy with him and disillusioned, and moving them. It wasn't about preaching doctrine to them. It was explaining why the president failed as a leader, which they felt deeply that he had done. Steve Bannon and I worked with David Bossie and helped work on a film called Hope and Change, which featured, and with Robert Kennedy specials on it, Democrats and independents who had voted for Obama. All of them, no Republicans, no Republicans, and no McCain voters. Not these are all people who've done that. All about their disillusionment, their lives. It was powerful. It was the highest tested research. However, the Republican Party establishment and the people who were running the Romney campaign, which, by the way, as you may know, if you watch Fox, I said for months was the single worst campaign in the history of American politics. Presidential elections, campaigns had a chance to win, and except for 90 minutes and one debate, they truly were the worst campaign. And it's impossible, to go through all of the stupid things that they did. And I want to talk just a couple of high points. The last thing I had said, which I played in this clip in November from 2011, was a statement was, if you don't beat Barack Obama by May, you will not defeat him. That's a simple matter. Karl Rove, who I'm sure is a hero to some of you people, and all of the people who collected hundreds of millions of dollars by treating donors like they were marks in the movie The Sting. Lining their pockets with incredible amounts of money. The chief of staff of the RNC and the political director of the Romney campaign, the two companies they had that did data mining. Well, we were told that just in October, the filing in early November, their companies, they now had gotten 38 million, but actually turned out to be 152 million, were failing miserably. And he, the chief of staff of the RNC, was being put in charge of the post-election analysis of what went wrong.
Yeah, right.
You know, he to study history about how these things perpetrate themselves. It's called covering things up, sweeping under, covering your ass, if you will. But there are a couple things from election that are important to understand. One of them was, it was a failure of imagination. The question is, could the election have been won? And if so, why it wasn't? And I won't spend a lot of time on it, except to say, yes, it could have been. It was how it would lose. It was almost incredible. I compared it to 1948. The Republican Party in 1946 won the biggest landslide, that it would win even bigger than 2010 after 23 years of the New Deal. 13 after a decade and a half of the New Deal. And then Tom Dewey was running, and all I could see was Romney. If I closed my eyes, I could see Alice Roosevelt Longworth's comment about he looked like the man on the wedding cake. If you just put a mustache on Romney, you could see this. I was furious at the third debate how you abandoned Libya. Because you think you're going to win, because you've convinced yourself you're going to win. So here we have a situation where the American people, 4 Americans are dead. The press is involved, and this is a big issue because I have described them literally as a threat to the fundamental, most greatest threat to the democracy now. Because they stopped covering the news, and now they not only support who you should vote for, but they now tell you what truth you may know. sat there and refused to say anything. And there's Romney sitting there deciding that he'll just not say anything. I thought the third debate, I said the next day on the air, I said, my God, halfway through I thought he was going to endorse Obama.
Yep.
When you substitute what you think are tactics for principle against the people who are winning is life or death, you will consistently lose. I'll make a couple points about the election. It is irrefutable in poll after poll by hundreds of organizations. If you ask people in this country, not that they understand ideology, but how do they think of themselves as liberals, conservative or moderate, the conservative edge over liberals ranges from the low of 18 to high of about 25 or 27 points. In this electorate that turned out, it was 10. It wasn't that there were a lot of new people, or there are demographic changes, but somebody didn't come out and somebody else did. And the Obama people got that 10 points. Now, Romney was ahead on things like in the exit poll, vision and better leader, but they weren't as important as one other thing. Cares about people like you was 87 to 13 for Obama. Because the inability to project empathy for ordinary people, which there are, which is really amazing to me. But more importantly, there were two issues where, despite this electorate, were still shows you what the real mindset of the American people, even of that voting population, was. And that was on the issue of, first of all, Obamacare. The issue that I had written about for many years, since 2000, was the issue that was unacceptable. So the American people will never accept this thing. It has been shoved down their throats. It is. I describe it as a crime against democracy, which it was. The Republican Party abandoned that issue in full. After Judge Roberts, and I won't have enough to say about him either, but his little switch in 9, but he did leave the Republicans a huge weapon, which I outlined after the decision, which was the tax issue. Because Obama had promised there were no taxes in this. And that's how they decided what it was, and then they're going to hire, they're hiring about 19,000 IRS agents, which is the size of the United States Heavy Armor Division.
That's the size of NASA.
Yes, that's how many they're going to hire to enforce your health care record. I kept saying, you take this issue and you ram it, pardon the expression, in a certain orifice. But not only did Romney abandon the Republican Party, because the establishment's never been against it. Too many of them have interest with insurance companies. Too many of them are interested in what they can do about it. They talk about it, but they don't. And I said, what you should do is, and I made this case to certain leaders in the Republican House in the summer, which is don't bring up a total repeal by, which you know is going to fail. Right. I mean, is you're going to pass it? No, make it just the taxes. Repeal the mandate, which it kills the bill, which they promised wasn't a tax mandate. No, they couldn't do that. They just go through the motions. That's what it's about. Convincing you that they're serious when they're not serious. And it convinces the country they don't stand for anything.
Right.
But in the exit poll, when asked whether we should keep or extend the health care bill, the Affordable Care Act, 44% of people were for it, 51% wanted to repeal it. Even in that electorate that was heavily, much less conservative than the voting population of the country. Same day they were electing Barack Obama. Almost 30% of the people who said repeal the bill voted for Obama. That tells you how effectively the campaign was. And then the one that I argued, not only me, but several other people, made the case that, look, if you look at the attitudinal philosophy of this country, if you ask the question, you want more government or less government, you want more expanded government, I don't care how you ask, government should lend a hand to people or should get out of the way, which is Gallup's question, more government, less government. It's a 25-point winning question against big government and more spending. Even in the exit poll, it was in double digits. Against, and guess who won? The greatest advocate of big government at all. Because the Republican candidate in the opposition had nothing to say. Most of all, what they lacked, when I said imagination, was a lack of this debt issue. It is not enough to get up and talk Washington speak. You listen to the debate in the fiscal thing with Cantor and McConnell and Boehner and all of them. My God, you just turn brain dead. It's about every kind of Washington language. No, let me tell you what the issue is. It's a fundamental moral question of whether or not this country will abandon its primary, the very core idea and the penultimate commandment to be an American. Will you leave your children a better future? Mitch Daniels of Indiana made that case in his response to President Obama's State of the Union. I thought it quite eloquent, amazing. But you see, they're not interested in that. They're interested in preserving power and privilege. Everyone in Washington is. That's what it is. And that will not change. It will not change by asking them to do it. When it happens at the local level, and I know controversy in the state the same way, you can keep electing people who say, as Bill said, that they're conservatives or whatever, but you get what you get. Because in the end, it's about arrangement. Well, the future of the country doesn't have time. It will not survive those arrangements. And now we have, and I'm going to tell you, I no longer define politics. We have the wrong paradigm. The paradigm is simple. 70 to 75% of the people hate the political class in Washington, in both parties. And my question to the Republicans who I announced in November were on their way to becoming the Whigs, the Whig Party, is simple. If one party is going to speak for government and the establishment, and the other party is going to speak for the establishment, then 70% of the people have no voice, and they will get a voice. Something will happen. You saw in '92 we had even though with all of his problems, including being insane, Ross Perot at one point had almost overthrown the American political process. He hadn't done it. The grassroots of the country had done it because they were tired of check kiting in the House, and they were tired of the deficit then that we would die to have that. Right? But we have no moral passion in this country for what we believe in unless it comes from the people. And my point is, we've got to stop letting our politics be divided in this game, in which those people in the political class make these artificial fights that divide the 75% from what I call an overarching, there are principles and ideas, there may be differences on other specific, but over the question of whether or not the United States should survive, whether this is an exceptional country, whether corruption is intolerable, whether the fact that the people are, we do not have a Potemkin village democracy here, a facade, but the people actually have the sovereignty, till we fight those people who say, I can rig the system, until it serves the American people and measuring the results, then we will keep going. But sooner or later we'll blow up. I said this yesterday, or it's already on the blogs, because I said, this country is on the verge of explosion. It doesn't seem like it, but somewhere the air is coming out of the balloon. The question you all have, and you count people that you know in your life, that you may not think you agree with politically on the kinds of questions we're talking about, they agree. You know, I watched the president today. I said election night. I was on late at night after with Neil Cavuto and Lou Dobbs and Lanny Davis, who worked for, is a friend of mine who had worked for Clinton. And they were all saying how, my God, Obama's going to reach out. I said, what are you talking about? This man, are you kidding? He is an absolute egomaniac. He will believe that he has a mandate. And why shouldn't he? He's sitting there watching the Republicans blow themselves up for him. That no one will challenge him. No one challenges in my party. I mean, today he is appointing Chuck Hagel to be Secretary of Defense, who is against sanctions on Iran, for negotiating with Hamas, and for having he's going to head the military and the defense establishment in the United States if Obama gets him through, which he probably will. And he is against any involvement or protecting of our interests anywhere. The reason they said is because he was a war hero, because he had 2 Purple Hearts. Well, hell, Audie Murphy had, in World War II, he could have filled his room with his medals. Most decorated, he was from Texas, most decorated soldier in American history. Nobody suggested he should be Secretary of Defense. He went to Hollywood and had a great career. But Chuck Hagel, and I watch this and I go, and this man is anti-Israel, our most important ally. He has looked at people on the left who don't like him for some of the stuff he's done. But he is, but I'm thinking, this is Obama being Obama. And of course the press protects him. And again, that's another point of mine, the press is not challenged on this. You can't whine about the press. You have to take them on to the fact that they have deserted their fundamental extra-constitutional duty, which is they are to protect the people from power, not to impose power on the people.
Amen.
So I watch all of these things go on and on and on in now, and I think it's a very hard moment. But I really do believe that we are headed, that something will have to break here. You can't continue to have what I watched this the other night and said, this is the most massive disconnect in my life. So what you're doing here, the fight you're making in Texas, the fights happening on national, there are people who are unhappy. There are a lot of donors who are really unhappy for being taken to the cleaners by people who lined their pockets and didn't deliver. By people who judge that they should still be there running things even when they fail. I don't know whatever happened to. But one thing you have to like about sports, once you start not performing, eventually you're gone. In this business, the worse you fail, the longer you stay. And that has to end. But the thing is, you have to have alternatives and choices. And that may be in primaries of both parties, but it must be around a collection of large ideas. The last question Rush Limbaugh asked me in this long 6-page interview was 50 minutes. Was he said to me, he said, do you have any hope in the country? And I said, of course I do. In the Revolutionary War, and this is what I believe, Jefferson and Hamilton, who were the fathers of our political ideological tradition, and became bitter political enemies after the Revolution, and when we had a country after the Constitution. But you know what? They were on the same side over the issue, should America be free? And that model, there are things that are bigger than what we now judge our politics to be. As long as the issue is, these people swear an oath to the United States, to the Constitution of the country. You do not swear an oath to a political party.
Amen.
That's right.
I am by heritage and will die a Democrat. I won't be Obama's Democrat, but I am not interested in a party. I'm interested in the party of America.
Amen.
And that is what we must start preaching. And it must be over the things that really matter, the biggest issues and questions. As Lincoln said, as he said, which is one of the great questions he asked, he said the issue before us is, shall this country survive or be preserved down to the latest generation? And as he was headed to Washington to take oath his oath of office, he stopped and gave this wonderful speech in Ohio, in which he said, it doesn't rest with me, or politicians, or office holders, or even the president, of whether or not these liberties in this nation will be preserved down to the latest generation. It will be with you, the people. I am merely an instrument of your will, temporarily put in a position of responsibility. But I can live because I know that it will depend on you. It's your choice. And we need a politics that speaks to people and says that empowers the American people to once again be brothers and sisters in service to the American dream and not to political ambition and corruption. Thank you.
Amen.